and good evening, friends, everybody here and those who are joining us on the internet. As Ember said, this is the last series of this program that has two titles, The Living Path or The Secret Path. We are going to explore the last, I think the last aspect of this program, which is what we should do at this point. We have seen the idea or talked about the idea of these enlightened beings who have reached the aim of the human evolution. We have seen the idea that these beings may be available to train other people to follow the same path in order to be able to help them in their work to help human evolution. And then we have seen the different stages or initiations that compose this path. But tonight we are going to see a more practical aspect, which is the preparation to enter this path. As we saw in the first talk, or the second, it's not that we need to seek this path, because it is something that works the other way around. You know this idea, fairly well known in the spiritual environment, that says when the person is ready, the master appears. So the idea is that all we can do is to try to tread the spiritual path. And if it is good for the world and for ourselves, then we may be invited to walk in this strenuous path. Because as we saw, to be accepted as a disciple, although for our lower ego it may seem as something that is a privilege, it may be a privilege from a higher point of view, but from the point of view of the personality, it is a really hard work. So much that most people would run away from it. You know, when offered this, they would embrace it very happily, and then after a few months, probably they would run away and never want to come back to this. Because this path, as we saw, and we are going to go more into details now, means, I always remember that phrase in the Bible, God is a fire that consumes everything, or an all-consuming fire. Obviously, what can be consumed is what is not real, in the sense that from a spiritual point of view, what is real is immortal, is immutable. And there is this image that God is at the center, or you can say the master or whatever, the divine is at the center. And as we go and approach the divine, there is a ring of fire that we have to go through and get burned. All the things that are not real in ourselves get burned, so that only the pure divine spark is there. So, to walk and I put emphasis on this aspect because in our culture we are very prone to think of these things as, ambition and privilege and be more than the other and getting something, be special. So this is a truth on this path, and most people that we know that have failed in the past, what we can know in the history of the Theosophical Society, was because they approached it in the wrong way. They took it as a path for personal advantage, and when they started seeing that it is the opposite, it is that you lose your personal rights because now you are a representation of the impersonal forces for the welfare of humanity. So when they saw that, of course, they failed or dropped from that path. So another thing that is important is that this path is inner. It's an inner path. It has very little to do with what is outside. I have a couple of quotes from Annie Besant. And the idea is that what essentially changes is how we do things, not what we do. Of course, if we are doing something that involves harm to other people or even to animals, that may need to change. But for the most part, people who are interested in spirituality, this is what in Buddhism they call the right means of livelihood. So for the most part, people who are in the spiritual path, they try to choose a job that doesn't harm, people or animals in a direct way, at least. And so for the most part, the change is an inner change. And you can be whatever you are. You can be a householder, you can be a scientist, you can be a teacher, you can work digging holes on the street and still be treading the path, because it has nothing to do with your external life. So Annie Besant, in the book In the Outer Court, which is a very, very interesting book, I recommend it, and much of the talk today is based on some points that she makes in that book. She says, no matter that many things that you have done or you have to do are trivial, it is the way of doing them and not the things that are done that makes the training which results in discipleship, not the particular kind of work that you have to do in the world, but the way that you do it, in the mind, the kind of mind that you bring to it, the forces with which you execute it, the training that you gain from it. This is what is important. So in how we do things, and we are going to talk about this, lies the treading of the path. So the first important aspect, and I mentioned a little about this, is the motivation, why we would want to enter in this path. The idea is that a person that is sensitive to the suffering of the world, we are sensitive of our suffering, but at a certain point we begin to be sensitive of the suffering of other people also. As long as we are completely self-absorbed, we are still far away from this path. But little by little, we begin to be concerned with the suffering of other people. Not necessarily, it depends on the kind of character that each person has. Some of them get involved in trying to produce a social change. Some others don't. But there is, in the aspirant, this feeling that there is something wrong with the world, that something needs to be changed. So that person may try to change things in different ways, in their family, or as I said, through social movements, or through teaching. But if the person thinks about, the world, the situations, try to reflect about life, soon that person will discover that no matter how much we can help externally, the root of the problems are in the hearts and minds of people. Because the politicians, we have resources for everybody to be happy on a physical level. There is no question about that. It's not that we don't have enough resources on Earth. The problem is that the politicians, they are trying to get, if not things for themselves, for their country, exploiting other countries so that we can have more easily accessible iPads and other people cannot get rice to eat. And or that the church or whatever institution or organization, they have their invested interest, and that even if we work in an organization that is sincere, the poor people or the oppressed, they keep being generated by the system. So at a certain point, the person discovers this is not the way, although it is good to help on the external level, because whoever you help, you are helping. There is this story about walking on a beach, and then there was a starfish, you say, on the sand. There were many of them, and there was a person throwing them back to the sea. But there were thousands of them. So somebody asked, why do you do it? You won't be able to get all the starfish into the sea. And he said, well, but the ones that I do get into the sea, they are saved. So even if I cannot do it for everybody or every one of them, I'm doing it for some. So if we help a person, we help that person. But if we want to, at the same time, to try to produce a deeper change, which usually takes longer, far longer, then we have to start looking into the cause of the problem. And in the Theosophical view and many other views, it is said that in the same way that there is a common atmosphere, let's say, and if I pollute the atmosphere here in the US, the whole atmosphere is going to be polluted, not only the one here, because we share a common atmosphere. So in the same way, if there is a common mind, if we pollute the mind, we are polluting the mind of the whole humanity. If we purify it, we are purifying the mind of the whole humanity. This idea was expressed in different ways, like saying if there were a critical mass of people that can radically change, that would produce a change or help the whole humanity change. It would be easier for them. And we can see it when we cannot change another person, that each one of us is an individual, but when the conditions are right, it is easier for people to work on the right path. So if a child is born in a family that has moral values, it's easier for that person to grow as a moral individual. You can never tell. It may happen that person, because the person has his or her own maturity, that is far better or far worse than the family. But generally speaking, if we change the environment, then it would be easier for the souls to be more spiritual. So there is the idea that if I can change myself, then that changes the whole world a little. And if more and more people do their work and change themselves, then there can be a change at the level of our minds and hearts, which are the ones that then apply politics and economics and this and that. So the idea of the need to change in this view comes not so much from the idea I want to reach nirvana or heaven or liberation, and I don't care about the rest of the people. I'll go to a forest and just get out of here, get rid of this. That's not the Theosophical view. Actually, it is said you can do that, but the kind of liberation that you can get, and I don't go into this too much because it's a complex subject, but it's like a transitory liberation. If you cut off all desires with the world, you don't incarnate again because there is no desire that is bringing you back. But since you didn't realize the unity with all mankind, which in the Theosophical view is the reality, then after some cycles, evolutionary cycles, you are dragged back on Earth. So your liberation was, partial. And it is said that many of the ascetic people, that they go away and they try to break the wheel of reincarnation in the Hindu view or the Buddhist view, they are in this state. And after all, they are not helping anybody. It's like you are in a family, you are the mother or the father, and there are problems in your house, and then you say, okay, I'm out of here. You take care of yourself. So the enlightened people, they really feel, well, yeah, this is a mess, but I'm here to try to help, not just to escape. So this is why one of the Mahatmas in the Theosophical view, he's known under the name Moria. He wrote a letter to an early member, and he said there are hundreds of thousands of fakirs, sannyasis, and sadhus. These are all names of different ascetics from India or Buddhist, Hindu, or some Muslims, leading the most pure lives, and yet, being as they are on the path of error, never had an opportunity to meet, see, or even hear of us. So the master says they are on the path of error. He doesn't say what that means. I think that what he means is that they are in the path of error in the sense that they are trying to escape from the world instead of trying to help the world. So they may follow their path, but the master will never get close to these people. Because as we said, the idea of a master of the wisdom to contact a person is only for that person to be trained and help the world. That's why they are investing that time and energy in training a person, so that this person can become a helper. Otherwise, that person can follow his or her own spiritual path or path of growth, and they are not going to communicate with them, which is fine also. You know, what my point is that we need to understand that the masters and the occult path is something that it's a particular function in nature. It's for people to be trained to help the world. And it's not something that everybody has to go through. So the idea is that the motivation to enter in this path is to try to help the world. Now, some people say, oh, yeah, sure, if I become a disciple and I develop wisdom and power, then I will help. Well, it doesn't work that way. We have to help with whatever means we have now, because the other is just an idea or an excuse. If we are helping in whatever situation our life puts us, you know, in your family, trying to raise your kids in the right way, which is usually far harder than the normal way because you go against the whole mass of our culture that goes in a different way, you are doing service. Or if you are by yourself and you can spend time in an organization that does something for humanity, then you are doing service. Or if you have money, instead of spending all that money in yourself and you donate it to places where they can use it to help, you are doing service in whatever situation. So that's something, it's a foundation for this path. That the idea is that person wants to help, and therefore if you see a person that wants to help, you will help the person to have the power to help. You know. So this is where the need for the self-transformation comes, because the masters say that before a person is ready to be trained, that person has to get to the point where they did everything they could do by themselves in this self-transformation, in this self-training. This is why sometimes I mention the difference between the theosophical view of the masters and other views. You know, people who are contacted by the masters are very few. They usually don't say it. And they are people who have worked a lot on themselves, a lot and for many lives. And people who are ready to help the world, and not by being a star. You know, everybody could say, okay, make me, you know, a teacher that will be followed by thousands of people and I will be of service. Usually, if you are followed by thousands of people, you are not saying the truth, you know, generally speaking, because you are saying what people want to hear. You know, I can start saying what people want to hear, and then more people will come. But that's what happens with the theosophical approach. You know, when we tell people, well, we have to change, we have to make an effort in this, we have to be unselfish. They say, oh, no, I want to go to this place where they tell me how to get more for myself, you know, more of this, more of that. But anyways, the idea is that these people are people who, in an impersonal way, in whatever position life put them, they may not be known at all by the world. They are genuinely trying to help. So this process of when these people did everything they could, then a master, and they are ready, then a master can come and say, okay, now you know you need help. Now you did everything you could, and they will help with the training. So this self-transformation, this preparation, implies working on several aspects of ourselves. Now you have, you have the 10 Commandments, and you can take them in two ways. One way is like a set of rules that you have to adjust to. Or the other is, this is how a person that perceives truth behaves. So if you want to perceive truth, you have this pattern of conduct that has to flourish in yourself. So for example, a person that is following or pursuing truth cannot be engaged in lying and cheating, and that's obvious. So one commandment would say, do not lie, do not try to get things from others, by cheating or whatever. So what you have to do is to say, okay, I will work on my tendencies to lie. I will try to discover why I do this. I will try to discover why truth is important. So you start working on that, and then the truthfulness will naturally flourish out of your work. Now, if you take it just as a commandment from somebody, then usually what happens is that what you try to do is to adjust your external behavior and not so much your inner behavior. And we are going to see this. So all these descriptions are not rules that you have to adjust to, but they are descriptions of this is what a more enlightened consciousness, or how a more enlightened consciousness perceives the world, people, life. So try to get close to this. This is your guide. It's like a map. So as I said, I'm going to touch upon some points that Annie Besant makes in her book, In the Outer Court. And I think it's a very good guide. There are many explanations of this. They are all different approaches. And then as you practice this, you begin to see things in your own way that may or may not match with what other people wrote. But generally speaking, I think this is a very universal exposition. So she talks first about the need for purification. The idea is that there is a higher nature, the truth is inside of all of us. Actually, we are the truth. It's not that we are something, the truth is inside. Our real self is the truth, and then in its process of expressing through the world, it assumes or it takes on certain things that, from a certain point of view, we could say are not the essence of that self. I already explained all this in previous series, but the idea, of a physical body, an emotional body, a mental body, so that we can express through thinking, feeling, acting, but that the problem is that these vehicles of consciousness, they have their own life, their own tendencies. As I explained, when I say I like this kind of food, in the Theosophical view, the way it is explained is your body likes this kind of food. Your body has certain tendencies. It is restless or lazy. It likes this kind of weather, this kind of food. We are identified with the body and we say, I like this, or I don't like that. But it is the consciousness of the body that has these tendencies. The same with the emotions. We say, I'm irritable, or I'm peaceful, or I'm this and that. Again, that's the qualities of your emotional field or your emotional body. And same with the mind. What we are is a pure consciousness behind that is trying to express through this. So the idea of purification is that we should work on these vehicles of consciousness, our body, our emotions, our mind, so that they lose this automatic response and they become vehicles of the inner consciousness. Because there are two ideas here. You have the matter and you have a consciousness that is living in this matter. This is a consciousness of the body that I talked about, and it's called elemental consciousness in Theosophy. It's a very elemental kind of consciousness, just as an animal consciousness. Even vegetables, they react to the environment, and there have been some experiments that they can sense when somebody tries to harm them, or that's a physical consciousness. So our body also has that. But the idea is that that consciousness can be tamed, if you want to see it in that way, just as you tame a horse. The horse has his own consciousness, and he will try to do whatever he wants until you tame it, and then you can use it as a vehicle. And then you will lead the horse where you want to go, not where the horse wants to go. So in the same way, we can work on our physical body, emotional and mental body, so that they are expressions of the real in ourselves, and not that the real is dragged to what the vehicles of consciousness want. So the process of purification implies this, implies to tame the vehicles of consciousness. So it's not really working at the level of consciousness, this particular stage. It's working on the vehicles of expression. In the early theosophical literature, they used to talk about to have an allegiance with the higher self, or with the real in ourselves. This is the decision that one makes, okay, I will try to follow what is higher in me and not what is lower in me. So when there is a conflict, our personal vehicles, they want revenge, they want to hit back, they want, we know, just it's the animal nature in us. That's perfectly natural. Now, we can tame those vehicles so that they can express in a non-destructive way. Because in an animal, it's natural. That's the stage of evolution that they are living, and that is necessary. The human evolution implies not to act like animals. Some people say, well, animals is nature, and if animals do this, why? Well, because there is a process of evolution. We are not supposed to act as animals. We have a mind, so therefore we are supposed to act as human beings. So the idea is that we pledge ourselves to the higher in ourselves and say, I will make an effort to choose the higher, as opposed to choose the lower. And we will succeed sometimes, and we will fail many times. But as in any training, little by little, we are going to be able to follow the higher in ourselves. So this implies a lot of things, and we are going to see some of them. But the idea is that this part of the training is more of a letting go than an acquiring something. We are all very happy when the path is presented to us as a question of acquisition. I will become wiser. We will have more virtues. I will be more good, have more goodness than anybody. That is appealing. But when it is said that we have to let go of this, let go of that, drop this, then it's different. Because the one that is appealing to is the personality, is that part in ourselves that is always trying, in a process of, a centrifugal force that is trying to gather everything for myself. We have to change that movement in a kind of centrifugal, start expanding and giving, not acquiring for myself. So this path is one of learning how to let go of desires that may be in the way of the general welfare. Some desires are perfectly fine, and it's not that we have to become, absolutely cold. Actually, it's the opposite. But we have to begin to be able to discern whether this desire, what is this desire feeding? And what is the effect of this desire? And there is a certain discernment that is necessary. If you are too tough on yourself, then maybe you will produce a lot of stress, and then you won't have the strength to deal with everything. So you have to start, letting go of the desires that are a problem, And then don't pay much attention to the ones that are smaller desires. You know, if you try to be too strict, too demanding, then you will exhaust yourself. But little by little, start with whatever is more problematic and is more obvious to you that you have to work on, and leave the rest aside. And little by little, as you work on one particular desire, your whole emotional nature begins to change. So all the other desires will also be less, strong, if we want to put it in that way. So it's a question of learning to let go. You have ambition, well, let go of that ambition, and not in a blind way, because I don't think the desires cling to us. We cling to the desire, and we don't know it, because there is something in us that is making us cling to that. So we have to realize, to see. It's like if we have many arms, and one of our arms is clinging to something, but we don't see it. We don't even know that that arm is there. We don't want to cling to something, but we don't see that arm. So when we become aware of that, then we let go, and then that grip, is released. So at the level of consciousness, when there is a desire, it's not very intelligent just to try to repress it, because as psychology knows, it always comes back in a different way. You have to discover, to be aware, why you are clinging to this. So it requires a lot of self-observation. Observe your desire. Observe yourself in being frustrated when you cannot get it. Observe yourself in being satisfied when you get it, the object of your desire. Try to see why you depend on it. Try to see how you were before getting the object of desire and how you are afterwards. For example, an easy example is with a piece of cake. Suppose you don't want to eat the piece of cake for any reason. It's not healthy, or you don't want to put on weight, or whatever reason. You have this craving. So if you really have this craving, okay, watch your movement and your experience of eating the cake, and watch it before, during, and after. And you will see that after eating the cake, it's not that you taste the cake, for 3 hours or 10 hours, that your craving may be gone. You taste it for a minute, and afterwards, you are just in the same position that at the beginning, but the craving is gone. Now, if you start watching how that craving works, and how before and after, objectively speaking, you are in the same situation, you are not keep tasting the cake, then you may begin to have a certain control and say, this will last a minute, it will be gone, and it may not be worth it. So that's an example of how we can work on a particular desire in whatever in your life you want to work on, through observation and not just blind repression. But it is important to start working on our desires so that two things happen. Our emotional nature begins, with all this work, the craving of our emotional nature diminishes. It has to do with these elementals. There is a consciousness, emotional consciousness, that craves a lot, and there is another kind of emotional consciousness that is like purer, if we want to call it in that way, that doesn't crave so much. So what you are doing is that by working on yourself, you are producing this change in the elemental consciousness of your emotional body. So at a certain point, desires are not a big problem in your life. You will have some desires, and you will see if it is harmless, that's fine. If it produces a problem, then it's easy for you just to drop it. But of course, all this happens gradually as you work on this. So to work on the purification of desires is something important, not only on the physical level, as I said, the cake, but also on an intellectual level. are craving for knowledge for the sake of being wise, not because if I know more, and not knowledge at the level of information, but if I realize better things, then I can discover what is true and what is false. That is fine, but there is a craving for knowledge, incorporate information so I know more. I feel larger, I feel it's a self-aggrandizement thing. So we have to work and let go of the desire for knowledge in that sense. The desire for spiritual growth. The desire for spiritual growth, which at a certain point is very good. You have a person that has an ambition to have more cars, a bigger house, and at a certain point, that person realizes, after all, this doesn't make me happier, and starts working on the spiritual field, pretty much usually with the same ambition. Now he wants to have more knowledge, wants to have more virtues. During the shift, that is the spiritual ambition is good. I mean, it's helping him to change the object of desire, which, one object keeps you tied more strongly to the physical, and the other object, the spiritual object of desire, it helps you be less dragged to the physical. But at this point that we are talking about, a person that is ready or is working on himself or herself to become ready to be a disciple, we have to even let go of the spiritual desire. Because after all, it's an ambition. And in Light on the Path, a very interesting theosophical book, it is said, kill out the ambition, but growth as those who, or work as those who have ambition, and grow unconsciously. It's not that we don't have to grow, but there is a growth that happens when we try to work with what is right now, without thinking of the path ahead and how good I am, or how close I am to be a disciple, or how better from other people. It's a mental question. We can work with whatever is here without any further thought of any kind of career, spiritual career that we have to make, or we can take this path of initiations as another object of ambition. So this is also part of the kind of desires we have to first become aware of, then see, understand all its working, and then let go of. Then in this process of purification, there is also another important aspect, that is, when you are in this path, you will see that many times to kill something is far easier than to transform something. But what it's required is not to kill what we see that is an obstacle, is to transform it. To kill something is pretty much what an ascetic person does when he goes to the mountain, the desert, or the forest. Kill desire. Just stop desiring things. So remove your eyes from anything that can be a temptation. Traditionally, for male monks, they cannot touch women or even look at women, or don't look at the environment. If it is, don't let yourself feel the pleasure of watching a beautiful environment, or don't sleep on nice sheets. That's something sensual. So the idea is to remove yourself completely from any object of desire and try to kill the desire. Now that is, even though many may think that is hard, that is far more, easier than transforming the desire. Because, for example, there is a situation and you are affected by that situation. Now, you will see that putting a barrier and saying, you know what, I don't care about this. I don't care about this. That's the end of it. It's far easier than caring about something and yet acting in the right way. I always put as an example when I was working in the lab, in my laboratory in Argentina. I was a perfect yogi in the lab because I didn't care about the lab, you know. So people would go through all these conflicts, the conflicts that are born from you caring about what you are doing, and they would get into these fights. And I was a perfect yogi because I really didn't care about the lab. But then in the TS, in the society that I really cared, then I would do similar things to what they did in the lab. Yeah, and you know, and I would get into trouble because I wanted to change people or to change things or the same that they wanted to do because they care about that. So, well, it's easier to cut yourself off, but it's more difficult to remain engaged with the world, with people, with relationships, and yet learn how to do it without falling into or self-centered attitudes or fear or ambition and all that. But unfortunately, in this path, what we need is to transform, not to kill. And there are some examples that Besan gives. But also, you know, there is another, I'll tell you some of those examples, they are good, but there is also another problem that as a person grows, it begins to develop things that seem to be flaws. But they are actually virtues in seed, a virtue that is not put in order. For example, you have a person that is very easygoing, and this person gets, you know, well with any person, and is able to work with everybody, and this and that may seem perfectly fine. And then you have this other person that is passionate, that has an idea things should be done in this way, and it's difficult to work with that person because that person wants to do things in this way. So naturally one would think, oh, the other kind of character, the easygoing, is, you know, better than this one. But it may not be the case, and many times it's not the case, because if this person is easygoing, just because, as I said, more or less with the lab, you know, that person doesn't have any particular aim, doesn't want to produce anything, it's just there. And to do this is fine for that person. To do that other thing is fine. You know, that person is not proactive. Then that shows a lack of a virtue that has to be developed. That is the ability to do things, to care about things, to try to help things move in the right direction. So as a person develops this, the first thing that happens is that produces this harmony around. Because, you know, as soon as you have your idea about what is right and what is wrong, then you will want people to do what you think is right. The other person that doesn't have any particular idea about right and wrong, then doesn't have that problem. But the person that cares about what is right, how things should be done, and then that person may have conflict with the environment. And at the beginning, you know, that person may be intolerant, but just because he's developing this virtue. That person is far ahead, if we want to see it in those terms, than the other person, in the sense that developing the ability to care about something is important. The problem in the world is that most people don't care about anything unless it affects their own desires. Then yes, they will fight something. Otherwise, they just don't care. Now, it is better, but still, that person has to learn how to purify that activity. So many times that person is tempted to become passive and say, you know, after all, I try to do the right thing and that only generates conflict and people blaming me. I would just do as this person does and everybody loves this person. You know, I won't say anything. I won't do anything. Just that would be to go back or to try to cut off. What we really need is say, okay, how do I transform this virtue that is in seed into a more purified virtue. So you start working on yourself and seeing why you react to things, trying to see what things are really fundamental and in what other things you can be flexible and, go more with the flow. It's a lot of work, but eventually you get to a person that is able to help the world and produce changes when it is necessary and in the way that it is necessary. These kind of people that have a lot of energy usually think that it is their job to change everything around. And I remember having this thought many times, and here and there I fall in the same thinking. But then one realizes that, there are situations where life puts you clearly in a position where you have to help producing a change in things that may depend on you, or, sometimes it's very clear. The rest of the time, you have to cooperate, and cooperate with the right aspect of the situation and let go of the wrong aspect. But all this takes a lot of, work to purify that attitude. But at the end, you have a person that can change the world, relatively speaking, that can help in whatever circle that person is to produce a change. While the easygoing person is easygoing, but will never be able to help produce a change. Of course, I am stereotyping this. We are all more complex than that, but it's just to give an example. So this is the aspect of the purification. So Annie Besant talks about anger, how we have to transform anger. She says, anger is a strong energy which expresses in a destructive way and usually in a selfish way at the beginning. Then, when the person grows, that anger is there, but begins to express in the defense of the other. Sometimes it is, in some religions, it is called a holy anger. Or like when Jesus, threw away all these people that were making business in the temple. But still, even though you are using it to defend the one that is being abused, or to fight against something that you think is wrong, or to fight against what is unfair, it is still a destructive energy. So what you have to do is to begin to work on this so that you can purify that energy. And you have this strong energy, but now without the destructive aspect. Now, sometimes, in the sense that, usually the first stage is to hate the sinner. You hate the sin and the sinner. If a person is doing something wrong, you will oppose that person, because that person is the one that is doing something wrong. So if you want to stop the wrongdoing, you try to attack the person. An attack by whatever means, depends. It can be by words, by writing, by going to the TV and denounce them. And that is a stage. But eventually, we realize that that person is myself, and in a real way, not just as an idea. When we begin to realize the unity of life, and you realize that this person is really doing more harm to himself or herself than to the people that he is really afflicting suffering, something that we cannot see at the moment, but as we work on ourselves, there are higher states of consciousness when we begin to realize this. So now you become able to fight the sin, but not the sinner, to have compassion for the sinner, just in the way that we educate a kid. When we see that the kid is doing something wrong, if we have love for him, we may even have to put restraints on the kid, but that is not something destructive, because the very love that you feel allows you to do something to attack the ill and not, to attack the sin and not the sinner. But when we don't have that love, we tend to destroy the sinner while trying to destroy the sin. So this anger that at the beginning is self-centered, then it becomes more altruistic, eventually has to be turned into a more compassionate energy that may fight the evil when it is needed to be done, but it will be done with compassion. So that is an example that Besant gives about this transmutation. And the last point that I wanted to mention, she mentions more points, of course, we have not too much time to talk about this, but it's the idea of controlling our minds. So what I was talking about was to purify, our vehicles by trying to control our emotions, and now to work on controlling our thoughts. And there are several reasons why we should do this. First, because our thinking is a power. We know that our actions are a power. So if I'm angry, I may harm a person if I just let my body express that anger. So I may harm a person physically. We know that our words may hurt. So if I'm angry, I can hurt a person with my words. And sometimes even worse than with physical actions. It depends on the situation. But also our thoughts, our very thoughts, even if they are not expressed, because of what we said at the beginning, every time we think, we may produce a force active in perpetuating ill feelings or a force active in perpetuating good feelings. When our thinking is not too strong, those forces will last, not too long. But as we increase in power of thinking through study and meditation and concentration, our thinking becomes much stronger than the thinking of any normal person. And once we enter in the path and our mind is awakened on higher levels, that person is able to kill another person with thinking. And we know, some people who are in kinds of sorceries, if they are powerful enough, they can even kill a person with their thinking. So it is necessary to have our mind in complete control before we are given power, So trying to control our thoughts is very important for that reason. Also, it's very important because we not only may harm other people, but we harm ourselves also. Whatever we put out, we attract. So if we are aggressive in our thinking, we attract aggression. If we are close-minded in our thinking, we attract situations of intolerance, and etc. So this part of the work on ourselves implies, again, self-observation, and begin to learn how to, in Masonry there is a phrase that is tiling the lodge. The idea is to close the lodge of Freemasons so that nobody that doesn't belong to Freemasonry can enter. This idea of tiling the lodge is interpreted in a psychological way in tiling your mind. Close your mind to negative thoughts. Your mind is a temple, and what is inside should be only that belongs to a temple, that is worthy of being in a temple. That means, good thoughts. So we should tile our mind so that negative thoughts don't come in. Because when they come in and we entertain them, we are giving them our life, our energy, and we put them out stronger than before. Now, this is a long process that, we little by little we learn how to do. To me, it is important that we don't develop any sense of guilt, because this may produce the idea of, I'm having negative thoughts, and then you feel guilty about that, and you think you are harming other people. Well, at this stage, yes, we may harm, but the harm that we can do is not too bad. So it is at this moment where we have to start training ourselves in this. So one way how to start, having this control over what enters in our minds. One thing is try to drop all situations where you engage in a kind of gossip. That we don't know what to talk about, and we start talking about other people, whether it is a famous actor or our neighbor, or if you observe this, the gossiping is just because we don't know what to talk about. And if you see wise people, they are many times very quiet people, because it is hard to do this, because when you don't want to engage in gossiping or just talking nonsense, there is no much that you can talk about, with normal people. And by normal people, I mean people who are not necessarily interested in leading a spiritual life. And that's why I say leading this path is challenging. In the New Age, they say, yeah, lead this path and you will get happiness and harmony and peace. That is true at the end. But first, you have to go through the fire. So you don't need to do it in a confrontational way. But there are many limitations if you don't want to engage in things that are wrong from your point of view, and that many people engage around. There are ties that are cut. Then it depends on your karma. Some people really don't feel any difference. Some other people do. It depends on many things. But one thing that we have to start trying to do is to stop engaging in conversations that are unhealthy. As at the beginning, if you do it, as most people do it, then you will see that people keep coming to you to gossip. So in gentle ways, you can say, after we talk about this, I feel bad. I don't want to talk about this because it puts anger in myself. So let us talk about something else. You can say something nice and not say, gossiping is bad and you are not a spiritual person, and so go away from. So the little by little, you create a different atmosphere around, and people won't come to you to gossip if they see that you don't engage in that. Now again, be patient. Nothing can be changed from one day to the other. People don't know that you change your mind, so they will keep relating to you as they are used to. But little by little, if you persist, that will change. Then in your own mind, when difficult thoughts or negative thoughts come, the easiest way to deal with that at the beginning is just think about something else. When you see that a thought comes, I don't know, if you can read, start reading something. It's better if you can read something that is spiritual, because at the same time, you are beginning to attract spiritual elementals, let's say, to your mind. But even if you cannot read something spiritual, read something else that is not about negative thoughts, that won't arise negative thoughts. Little by little, you will discover that you can put your mind in something else. So you will develop this ability of simply closing your mind to that. You discover that you are about to begin to think about something negative and say, it's useless. Drop it. And you can drop it. After you train yourself in this, you will see that controlling the mind in this way is far easier than controlling the emotions and far easier than controlling the body. The mind, at the beginning, it seems a hell. But thoughts are like very subtle, and once you get a hold of it, it's easier to change your mind to look at other things. But along with this, there has to be self-observation. When there is a thinking that is repetitive, then it's not just a passing thought. There is a pattern there. So begin to watch it without trying to control it and see where this comes from. What are you hurt about? Write it down if you want, or begin to pay attention to it, because if something is a pattern, there is a root in yourself. There are two kinds of thinking. One that there is something in yourself, and another kind of thinking that is just floating, because everybody's producing thought and comes into our mind, and if we are not aware, we begin to reproduce that thought. Somebody has a thought of anger about their mother-in-law, and it comes to you, and you don't know that woman, but the thought of anger comes to you, and you will start thinking of somebody else that makes you angry. So this thinking comes from the outside, so you can shut your mind to that. But if there is a pattern, then you need to do something else and start, watching it. And in that way, you will begin to be able to tile your mind, to close the mind to what is unworthy. So that's more or less what I think, that by learning how to work on our emotions, our mind, and our general purification. I didn't talk much about the physical discipline, because some people, may feel may be more sensitive to this. In the Theosophical literature, it is usually recommended not to eat meat, besides the fact of that we make animals suffer. Also, the meat that we incorporate is feeding these elementals that we are trying to tame. So, it's easier if you don't eat meat, or different things like that. But at the same time, I feel that if you produce a change in consciousness, then the physical change will be easier to do. So, we don't have to become a fundamentalist in anything. So look at your life. For some people, some aspects are really difficult. If you are sincere, start working on some other aspects, and then that deeper clarity that you get there will help you to see what you have to do in some other aspects of your life. So I was saying the purification, the control of our emotions, and the control of our mind, I think are the basic tools that will allow us to produce a transformation in ourselves. So now, as usual, we can have a moment for discussion, questions, answers, or comments, or things you don't agree with.
If I got this right, you were perfectly happy in the lab, minding your own business, and then you felt the urge to come here and tell people how to live. Is that what's going on?
The idea is that what is required from us, it's easier. There are two paths. The path of where you are self-centered, and you can cut yourself off from relationships or from this and from that, and then you are peaceful because you put yourself in a crystal ball. Or the more challenging one is to engage with the world and yet learn how to relate to the world in a different way. There is this saying, be in the world, but not of the world. In the sense, be in the world, but be not part of the world of ambition and aggression and this and that. So I realized that it was easy for me to have this, calm and balance that many times is required for all this in the lab, because ultimately speaking, I wasn't invested in it. I didn't care about making the lab a better place or make it, I didn't care about that. So it's easy to be cooler about the situations. But in situations where you are invested, it's more difficult. And the idea with this path is that we have to be committed to life. Not necessarily to change people, but we are supposed to try to be a positive force in life in whatever circumstance our particular karma allows us at that point. So when you are invested, or when you are interested in helping produce a change, to put it in that way, then it is more difficult to be, calm and balanced.
I have one quick question. You talk about gossip and negative talk. Is that only negative talk, or what do we mean about when we say positive things about people? Because I have a lot of people tell me even that is gossip and I shouldn't be doing that.
No. The first question is, why do we need to talk about other people? That is the first thing. Sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes there is a problem. You have to, if you want to solve the problem, you have to talk about that. You can talk about, people doing this and that. If you are sincere, your genuine attempt is to see how to relate to this, how to solve this. Or then there is this question that I was mentioning: why do we need to talk about other people? But you may talk about other people out of love, just as you talk about your daughter or your little nephew or your parents. So it's fine. And talking about positive things, it's always positive for people, because we actually, in the Theosophical literature, it is usually said, if you have a problem with a person, you thinking about, that person's flaw, you are making that flaw stronger. And also you are generating a karma for yourself, because now you are being part of the person's flaw. You are being part of the forces that are making that person's, struggle more difficult. So they always say, in a situation of conflict, try to think about, at least give it a twist and think about what that person could develop, so that you think about tolerance instead of how intolerant the person is. So saying positive things about somebody, I don't think that would be harmful. But if it is hiding the seed that our need to talk about other people, then we have to work on that.
Good evening. Thank you for the talk. It was very, very interesting, actually.
Thank you.
Very interesting. My question is, you talked a lot about self-observation and observing one's own behavior and initiating a change towards a better behavior as things arise. And I'm wondering, what practices do you do or do you recommend that have helped you to initiate those kind of changes in observation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are different stages, or I've seen different stages in my approach, and I saw it in other people also. So at the beginning, usually helps to do something that has more of a structure, and then little by little, that becomes part of you, and you don't need to use the structure anymore. But for example, something that is recommended is try to see yourself and see what produces a problem in your life, not only to yourself, but in your relationship with people around. Try to discover, if you want to call it weakness or shortcoming or whatever, something that is producing a problem, that is not letting the true self express. So the first thing would be to try to become aware of it. Once you become aware of it, don't be thinking about it, because if you keep thinking about it, you are making it stronger with your thinking. If you say, well, I had this weakness, I mentioned the truthfulness or lying. I had this weakness that I cannot be honest, I lie. Then try to see why, because there are all different kinds of reasons why you are doing that. It may be because you are shy. It may be because you are trying to manipulate people. It may be because you don't want people to bother you, so you say whatever they want to hear. There may be, all kinds of reasons. So try to see what the root of it is. So that would be the part of self-observation. Now, once you discover it, let's say, you discover that you are not honest because you want to put up an image because you don't feel confident about showing who you are. So it's a question of a lack of self-confidence. It's not that you want to cheat on people or, So then start trying to think what kind of virtue would counteract that flaw. So suppose that is, self-confidence that you need. So start working on that aspect. Try to research, to study why you should be confident. Confidence about life, so you can study about these ideas of karma and that things that happen, they have a purpose, so you are confident about life. Then you study about yourself and you try to realize more and more who we really are. as opposed to our particular mind or emotions. So by studying about this, you begin to develop a sense that you are beyond the personality. That brings some self-confidence. And think about it, try to get some clarity, really question this. For example, sometimes we repeat this saying, hate doesn't end by hate, it ends by love. And we say, well, the Buddha said it and Jesus said it, it must be true. But for us, it doesn't make sense. So be honest, and if you are working on, if you are too angry, trying to work on that, be honest and say, what does it mean? If a person is being, harmful, how is that person going to change by me being loving? Or at what level this is going to work? What does it imply? What happens on me if I'm loving? A real thinking, meditating on it, so that you get clarity. Because when you get clarity, then you have the strength to practice it. It's very difficult to practice something. You come and say, I have this problem. What should I do? And I give you an answer. Regardless of the answer being true or not, if you don't see the problem, it's really difficult to do it because you don't see it. So you have to force yourself without the understanding. So this process of studying, reflecting about it, meditating, brings the intellectual certainty. Once you have that, it is easier to practice it. So the third stage is to actually practice it. In life, try to be confident. Try to go through life trusting that anything that happens is within the right order. That you can show whatever you are, and this is what is right for the moment. So observation of a flaw, choosing of a virtue, reflecting, meditating, trying to understand fully the virtue and the practice of it would be a way in which you can work on yourself. Now, as you do this and your whole approach matures, you don't necessarily need to do this in that structured way because it becomes part of you. And it becomes very fast. You see something in you, you see what the problem is, you see what you have to do, and you try to do it. But at the beginning, a structure may help. So that could be an approach.
You may have answered some of this, but Isabella writes that it's hard to control or observe a situation producing overwhelming feelings of anger or fear. What would be the best way to deal with such a situation from a spiritual point of view?
Don't start by those situations because those are very difficult. I mean, sometimes you have to because there is a crisis and either you solve it or, there is a problem. But I would recommend not to start by those situations. If you work on, if you say, okay, I will work on the question of lying. Well, don't start when your boss is asking you if you did something. Start by simpler things. And then as you develop more understanding, more strength, you can expand that to the different areas of your life. And you will have the strength and the understanding to work on the most difficult things. Many times when we talk about something, the mind automatically goes to the extreme. We talk about detachment, and people don't think their attachment to this TV show or to this magazine. They think of their attachment to their husband or to their son. Well, those are big things. Start with we have plenty of little things to start with, and then you will understand what it means in more complex situations. But if you are in a situation that is really difficult and that produces a lot of anxiety, it depends how much of anxiety it produces. If you can, observe this anxiety, go to your room and let go of any kind of control, inward control, and let the anxiety flourish and watch it. Watch it as you watch a movie or as if somebody were telling you all this. And let your mind say whatever the mind wants. Because this person is so unfair and I wish this person would die or whatever. Don't be scared because the elemental will say all that. So don't be scared. Just watch all the anxiety, and if you are able to watch it without being dragged into it and losing your awareness, that very watching will begin to heal, to produce a healing, will begin to produce a certain order. Now, if you can't, you need to use more intellectual means. So you may, when you are meditating, there is a technique of meditation where you imagine yourself in that situation and you watch all the anxiety and you imagine yourself doing the right thing. As you do it more and more, then when you are in the situation, there is like a pathway that is open there for you to make an effort to act in that way. So that is a meditation that every day suppose there is a person that is very, very irritating. Well, you can meditate on visualizing yourself with this person and this person being irritating and you responding with love or patience. And if you do it constantly, eventually, you develop the ability to do it. But if even that is difficult, what I would say is try to find an understanding of the situation, how the situation, no matter how much suffering it is producing, how that situation is part of a higher order. Something that intellectually justifies the situation so that it doesn't produce anxiety. Justifies in the sense of you can understand it from a different perspective, and that may help. So it depends on many things, what the situation is and your tendencies. Or some people are more devotional and they just surrender. So put this at the feet of the Master or Jesus and say, I have to go through this. I have to bear my cross. I'll do it for you if you are a Christian. Or, some people find this surrender an attitude that helps. So there are many tools, but it depends on how we are